Towards the end of last year, talking with the leaders of some of the other churches in Penzance, it was thought to be a good idea for 3 weeks or so about now that we all preached on the same subject. Whether we're all going to say the same thing, it doesn't matter, but we're going to... So, we're having a slight pause from St John's Gospel, and we're going to look at Luke 15, lost sheep. Luke 15, just the first 7 verses. One day when many tax collectors and other outcasts came to listen to Jesus, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law started grumbling, "This man welcomes outcasts and even eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. What does he do? He leaves the other 99 sheep in the pasture and goes looking for the one that got lost until he finds it. When he finds it, he's so happy that he puts it on his shoulders and carries it back home. Then he calls his friends and neighbours together and says to them, 'I am so happy. I found my lost sheep. Let us celebrate.' In the same way, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 respectable people who do not need to repent." When I came to look at this story of the lost sheep again, I thought to myself, what else can you say about the parable of the lost sheep that you haven't said before? What could I say to you that you haven't already heard? 3 points about the parable of the lost sheep. But I would just encourage you to reflect upon it this morning. The context is that the religious people are whinging. Jesus has no problem attracting ordinary people. And so there's lots of ordinary people, but the religious and the so-called good do not like it, so they're moaning and groaning. Slight heads up for us there. And then Jesus says, they say, well, really, how do you come to this? How do you come to be eating and drinking with all these? I mean, they're just average people. When they talk about, publicans and sinners and tax collectors, they're just unpopular civil servants and the average working class. It's just, how can you mix with these people? They're so imperfect. And then Jesus tells them this story about sheep, and you can imagine them thinking, now we want to talk about why you're eating with all these people. Why are you telling us about sheep? That's one of the magic things about a parable. You're waiting to see what it's about, really. And it's good to reflect on this, because Jesus is basically saying, you want to know how I got here? You want to know how I finish up eating with these people? You want to know why it is I seem to be mixing with imperfect people? I'll tell you how it is. In fact, it's more than how I got here. How I got here involves the whole Christmas thing and all that muddy water in the Jordan and all the way through to here. There's a big picture, and the big picture is essentially, we get this in Luke 19, that the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. I'll tell you a story about that. And just as they had to pick it up from the sheep bit, I think we need to pick it up. You want to know what I'm about, says Jesus? You want to know what God's heart is like? It is to seek and to save the lost. So listen to this. And just incidentally, by lost, he does not mean what we might call dramatically lost. He doesn't just mean terrorists, and it just doesn't mean, violent people. It means ordinarily lost. It's interesting, actually, if you think about being lost on a journey, you're either lost or you're not lost, aren't you? You might feel you're very lost. But actually, I've been in places where you can be lost just round the corner. Just as much if you were 10 miles off. And in fact, if any of you have suffered from, I was going to say the demonic sat-nav, but the sort of thing, that's even worse, because it tells you when you're round the corner that you're there. Just lost. Just lost. We're all lost in some aspects. I don't think most of you are completely lost, but we are far from where we need to be in certain aspects of our life. So think lost. And Jesus says, let me tell you about this shepherd. Let me tell you about the heart of God. And if we look at this very well-known little story about the man who loses his sheep, leaves the 99 and goes off and finds it, brings it back and has a party, it's got so much that I need to be reminded about what God is like. Because it's easy to drift from that. God clearly, like this shepherd, has a tremendous passion for this sheep. And for all of his sheep, actually. When I say passion, I mean strong love. You can tell how somebody feels about something they've lost by how excited they are by when they find it. We didn't do it this year, but we have done it in past years where we've had a family jigsaw. You know, the family jigsaw? And in a big jigsaw, there's always one bit, isn't there? It's usually a bit of grey sky or something like this. And I'm thinking, I've often thought, I'd like to find that bit. I really would, for two reasons. One is I'd like to do the picture, and two, I'd like to find it rather than somebody else in the family finding it. You know? And when you find it, you say, yes, I found it. But you compare that with how excited I might be if I've lost my car keys somewhere out of doors. And then you find them and you think, thank you, Lord. Or you lose your wallet with all your bank cards in it. And you think, oh. Or, and I've not done this, I lost it, if I lose a grandchild on the beach. We're not talking a bit of the jigsaw here, are we? How pleased you are indicates how much you cared. And this guy has a party for a sheep. God has a tremendous passion for the lost. He doesn't say, oh, somebody's missing this week. I wonder where they are. It'd be nice to make up the numbers. He's a real passion for the lost. So to begin with, you've got this great sort of, be careful with this microphone, this great, this is where God is. You want to hear that? It's God is like. And this passion drives this shepherd to go and find this sheep. Now, the sheep gets lost because it's a sheep. The sheep gets lost of its own accord. It's the sheep's fault. But he owns the problem. Do you notice how the shepherd says, my sheep was lost? If this was Monty Python, he would have said, my ex-sheep. When it's lost, it ceases to be my sheep. But he doesn't. He continues to own the sheep that's lost. He continues to feel strongly about the sheep he hasn't got. This is a tremendous thing, that God's passion means that where there are people who, from their own fault, go far away, he doesn't bin them. He continues to own them. They're still my people. I still love them. This is the story of the universe, isn't it? This is the story of everything since creation. At the end of the day, back in the Adam and Eve story, we do not read, and Eve was lying on the grass asleep under a tree, and she was snoring and her mouth was open, and the apple fell in it. She eats the thing. It's her fault. And from the rest of history, God owns the problem, although it was her fault. That is really passionate love. Not, as I would have been, wretched sheep. But this is the sheep's fault and my problem. You feel that when you think, it's my fault, but God makes it his problem. So there's that sense of ownership. And it drives him out to do stuff, to find the sheep. Now, I'm going to tell you before, I remember a Victorian picture on a church hall wall, which I had to look at because I was in a meeting and there was nothing else to look at. And this picture was of this verse, and it's classic stuff. There's this huge ravine. The sheep is caught in a small bush on the edge of a very, very fragile ledge, about to fall into the abyss. And the great shepherd is reaching through the briars down to this like this, just before, this is how the Victorian, I do not know how many lions and bears there were around in those days when the shepherd went off to find the sheep. it's no need to be melodramatic about it, but he still moves himself. He still puts the others at risk to some extent, and he goes, and it's hot and it's miserable and it's onerous and it could be dangerous and it's not particularly pleasant. But he goes, he does it. The love drives him out. He doesn't say, "Oh, it's such a shame about that sheep." He does not say, "I can imagine that sheep lost." He doesn't say to his friends, "Just think of him out there now in the dark bleating." He actually goes. He goes. He moves himself. You can tell so often how much somebody loves by what they do. Now, lots of people love us at Christmas, don't they, in some way or another. Lots of people send you Christmas cards with love, sometimes with kisses. But then again, how much does this work? How much are they loving you? Are they sending you one of those Christmas cards which says, like, "Dear Occupier" on it, you know? Or as I've had in the past, "Dear Reverend and Mrs. Blott." How much love is that? You know, oh, it is love, but it's not. Yeah. And some people can send you presents as well. They love you that much. And some people love you enough to send you presents you want. And some people can love you enough to come and see you. And some people can love you enough that when they see you're exhausted, they go home. So there's a lot of but you can tell by what people do. And so with this shepherd, you can see how he feels about the shepherd because he's out on the job. Love is an event, isn't it? Rather than an emotion. Love is an event. And he goes out and he's called to, he's motivated to do this. To what? He goes, how long? Until he finds it. So the heart of God is to find rather than to just seek. To seek and to save, right? To seek and to save. What are you going to do? I'm going to find my sheep. Oh, I thought you were just going to look for it. No, I'm going to find it. That is the heart of God, to find, to save, not just to look. Naturally, when we lose somebody, sadly, over a cliff or something, where we don't know where it is, the statutory thing is that the response services, the emergency services, we have helicopters and lifeboats and everything for 3 days, and then after that it's scaled back, as they say, and scaled back until it's just a file in missing persons. God is not like that. This shepherd is not like that. He said, I'll give him 2 days and then see if he turns up. How long do I look till I find him? What is the business? I come to seek and to save, not to seek and say, well, we'll see what happens. That's amazing. And when he finds it, he puts it on his shoulders and brings it home. In other words, when he finds the sheep, probably more weak, more smelly and more moth-eaten than the average sheep, he puts it on his shoulders. It's not really heavy, but it's like, can you imagine having sort of a dead scarf, really bad, and walks home with the thing. The fact is that God's heart is that when somebody is found, in some ways, that's when the problems start. But he brings them home. He carries the weight. He takes the strain. There is no sense in which the sheep is bawled out at this point, but is brought home with joy to where it needs to be. Back to unity with all the other sheep and with the shepherd. And Jesus says, you want to know why I'm talking to these people? You want to know why I'm eating with these people? Because that's what God is like. That is God's heart. Now, the Bible tells us that we need to have that mind which was in Christ Jesus. So Jesus is saying to us, and I would like you to be like this if you're a follower of mine. You could just run through that with a quick checklist and say, how passionate do I feel about people who are lost? They may not know worse or better than I am, but they don't know Jesus, so they're lost. How passionate do I feel about them? Am I interested? Would I tell them if they ask me? But I'll give you a test on this. Say one of your nearest and dearest relations, was taken seriously ill in hospital. They're in intensive care. They've got tubes and pumps and all that sort of thing. It's going to be touch and go. We're going to pray. We're going to pray, and we're going to go, and we're going to see them as quickly as we can. And it doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter how much it costs in the car park. We're going to be there for them. And we're going to be praying, oh God, bring this person through, that they should live. And when they do, we are so delighted. There's a real passion there. Take somebody else in your extended family who is not a Christian, who doesn't want to be a Christian, who is stroppy about Christianity, who is negative about Jesus and gives you a hard time, who is lost. How desperate are you about that compared to the other? How desperate are you in your prayer and your work and your reaching out to them? I tell you, I'm much less desperate. And yet one is lost, and the other one, do we have that passion? And am I prepared to follow it through? It's a real sense in modern society to say whose responsibility is everything. Well, it's their fault, they're going to have to live with it. No. God said, it's your fault and I'm going to have to live with it. I got that? I'm not sure. I'm working on it. What about this perseverance? Well, I did try and I didn't want to know, so that was that. Will I try as long as it takes? Just some practical stuff. Reading a book by Bill Hybels about Just Walk Across the Room, and he says some very specific things. He said, you're going to try and do some stuff with people. If you were going to share something about Jesus with somebody, you've got to meet somebody, you've got to know somebody, you've got to talk to somebody, you've got to be in some kind of environment where you do know people. It's no good not talking to anybody about anything, even the weather. If you don't talk about the weather, you're not going to talk about Jesus. If you don't go anywhere, you don't meet anybody. If you only go to church meetings, they all know already. And if you are in a situation, will you just say, hi, who are you? How are you? Because if you can't say who are you and how are you, you're not going to tell them about Jesus. How can I help? Will I go out like this, seeking to save the lost? Or am I hoping the lost will just fall onto my sofa to be saved? I think that's challenging. But it's very practical. We could do this. And pray, Lord, give me some openings in ordinary conversations this week that I can share the good news with you. And we're not talking about giving out tracts and being embarrassing. We are saying that people, through the Spirit, will hear about Jesus. And am I prepared that when I do, in a situation where I do make contact with people, am I prepared for their problems? Am I prepared to say, how are you, and I really want to know? Or am I really saying, how are you, but don't tell me if it's difficult? Am I prepared to carry the sheep? Are we as a church prepared to say, somebody come in, whoever and how are we, and tell us how we can help? I think we're only really going to get into this, and I'm only into this when I have that sense, and you'll know what I mean, that I myself have been found. I think it's only when you know that you've been found that you have this passion and love to find others. If it's just that's something that disciples ought to do, that's something that sort of Christians ought to do, we ain't going to do it. But if you know, and you can reflect on this, it doesn't have to be last week, but if you know you're a found person, if you look back over the last few weeks and months and can say, you know, Jesus did not give up on me then. Jesus did not stop looking. Jesus did not say it's your fault. Jesus did not just leave me, but Jesus found me and brought me home. If you've experienced the heart of Jesus and you remember that, then you are fired up. Then you are saying, I just need to seek and save the lost as well. Those 99 sheep, after about 2 or 3 years in that sheepfold, I reckon they'd all been lost one at a time. So actually, they're all lost. So they are a flock of lost people. That's a really great thing for a church to be. That we are a flock of lost people who got found. And so this morning, as we come to communion, You might say, Lord, I just want to rerun in my mind a thanksgiving that you have found me. It's just as an automatic. What would happen if you hadn't found me, for goodness sake? Just think, what would happen if we hadn't had Christmas? What would happen if we didn't have Easter? What would happen if he hadn't found us? Fill my heart, Lord, with fresh thanksgiving. And give me a heart to seek and save the lost. And if this morning you need a bit of finding yourself, hear that word again, the passionate love that Jesus has for you. That he does not give up on you. That you may give up on yourself sometimes, but it's your fault, but he makes it his problem. And he goes on seeking you, as long as it takes, till this morning perhaps. And he seeks to bring you home.